The 2004 NFL Draft is up there among some of the greatest quarterback draft classes of all time. It is often debated between this class and the stacked 1983 one as being the greatest of all time. The 2004 class featured two-time Super Bowl champion and a surefire Hall of Famer in Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, who himself is a two-time Super Bowl champion that included defeating the, at one point, 18-0 juggernaut Patriots. Two rings that'll most likely ensure him going into the Hall of Fame. And then you have Philip Rivers, who from a talent perspective might be the best quarterback in this class. Beyond the first round, you also do have Matt Schwab, who was drafted in the third round by the Atlanta Falcons, who was able to carve out a 16-year career that included 2 Pro Bowls. With 3 potential Hall of Famers and another solid quarterback in the third, it's no wonder that people call this class one of the greatest ever. However, there is one guy who's often forgotten about, and with good reason.
Snap to Losman. They set up a screen. It's going to be intercepted. Elvis Dumerville intercepted. He's got some room to run.
Losman from his own end zone. Safety.
Bill's second-year starter, JP Losman, was under attack all afternoon.
And right before the 2-minute warning, they decided to throw it.
I'm upset at the way certain newspapers are writing articles about how we need to look to the future and the season's over. It's ridiculous.
JP Losman was among the quarterbacks selected in the first round, but unlike his peers, flamed out by the age of 30. But why exactly did this happen? How did the Bills miss in such a star-studded draft class? And was Losman really that bad? Or was he just unfairly compared to the other 3 legendary quarterbacks in the first round? I'll tell you guys straight up right now, he wasn't very good. But how bad? Well, you have to stick around to find out. Losman would attend a relatively small D1 college in the Tulane Green Waves, a school while historical was more just a punching bag for the bigger D1 programs like LSU and Ole Miss. Between 2000 and 2003, the team didn't make much of a splash, but that wasn't necessarily a knock on JP. During his senior year, the team would go 5-7, but Losman did toss 33 touchdowns to 14 interceptions and threw for over 3,000 yards. He had a good sense of the pocket and a cannon for an arm, and at 6'2" with plenty of footage on the guy, you could see that there was definitely potential, and that was enough for teams to be interested and one in particular to give him a shot. Enter the Buffalo Bills. The Bills were far from the powerhouse that they're known for today. Buffalo, just like the rest of the AFC East during this time, were merely cannon fodder to the Brady-led Patriots, who were in the midst of 2 decades of dominance.
Boring.
In 2003, the Bills went 6-10 and would fire Greg Williams to hire Mike Mularkey in his place. Yes, that same Mike Mularkey. Despite already having Drew Bledsoe on the roster, Buffalo would gamble and trade back into the first round, taking the Tulane product, making him the 4th and final quarterback selected in the first round, giving up a future 1st, 2nd, and 5th round pick in the process. Unfortunately, Losman's career in Buffalo got off to a rough start, to say the least. In the first training camp of the new year, Losman would collide with Troy Vincent, which resulted in the rookie breaking his fibula, thus losing crucial time to build chemistry with the team. He would make it back before season's end, appearing in 4 games, but not really doing anything other than throwing a single interception. Regardless, the Bills were ready to move on from Bledsoe to let their gamble sink or swim. And you know what? The offense at this time wasn't too bad, at least on paper. The Bills did draft Lee Evans before trading back to get Losman in that same draft, and they also had a young Willis McGahee who was coming off a 1,000 rush yard campaign. And Buffalo did go 9-7, so there was a chance Buffalo could make some noise. After defeating the Texans, though, Losman would not win another game as the team's starter in 2005. He'd lose his next 3 games, failing to throw a single touchdown or even complete 50% of his passes in the process, and he'd be benched in favor of perennial journeyman Kelly Holcomb. 2005 was brutal for JP, tossing 8 touchdowns to 8 interceptions and failing to crack 1,400 passing yards. He also even failed to average even a 50% completion rate and achieved a 2-7 record. The Bill Brass would clean house in 2006 following a 5-11 campaign. This included Mularkey getting canned after 2 seasons and being replaced with Dick Jauron. Despite the rough start to his career, Losman was still given the opportunity to prove that he can be the guy in Buffalo. And he did take a step in the right direction. He would start every game for the Bills and would finish with more touchdowns than interceptions at 19 and 14 respectively. He would even have a few 300-yard pass games during this campaign, and with his 84.9 passer rating, Losman was even ranked the 11th best passer this year. With an improved offensive line, defense, and Marshawn Lynch now in the backfield, it looked like Buffalo had turned the corner given their improved 7-9 record. I think it's at this point that you could tell Losman, while did have an improved season, had his confidence shaken at the hands of the Bills drafting another quarterback in the 2007 draft. In the 3rd round, Buffalo would snag Stanford product Trent Edwards, and Losman could not shake the feeling of the rookie hovering to take his spot. The feeling was justified, as after JP was injured in week 3, Edwards would step in and make the most of his opportunity. Trent would guide the team to 2 wins in the next 3 games, which would actually earn him the starting position going forward. While Losman did come in for the often injured Edwards, it seemed as if the front office had already made up their mind about the former first-round quarterback. Losman just could not do enough to justify a long-term contract extension, and thus they really wanted to see what they had in their rookie. So as long as Edwards was healthy, he'd be QB1. 2008 was more of the same. He'd come in for Edwards as needed, but never had a statement game to make a case for him to be the quarterback going forward, and the Bills ultimately just let his contract expire. When you look back on his time in Buffalo, you can't help but feel that he got the short end of the stick often. Very similar to Alex Smith's time in San Francisco, Losman dealt with injuries as well as a revolving door at offensive coordinator, and in a way you could also say at head coach too. You also can't ignore the fact that the team was very poorly managed at this time. Owner Ralph Wilson allegedly influenced the coaching staff to keep Losman out of action in 2007 so they wouldn't have to pay him any milestones he may have achieved by playing. You combine that with the former Bills Vice President of Player Personnel John Guy's comments about Losman's time with the team, where he mentions, quote, "JP never had a fair chance. I'll never forget his first day of practice, and they were blitzing him every which way. And I remember saying, this isn't the way to break in a quarterback." The cards were certainly stacked against him during his time in Buffalo. At least that's what it sounds like. For what it's worth though, between Buffalo's 2 main franchise quarterbacks in Jim Kelly, whose final game was 1996, and Josh Allen, who became the guy in Buffalo in 2018, it was a total of 22 years that went by before they could find an answer at that position. So maybe it wasn't a Losman thing after all, maybe it was just a Buffalo thing. But as much as we can complain about Buffalo, one thing that we don't mention here is that Losman never got a legit chance with another team ever again. After his run in Buffalo ended, JP would sign with the UFL's Las Vegas Locomotives in 2009, where he actually won the inaugural championship with them. So what happened here? Why did he go to the UFL instead of signing with another team right after Buffalo? Many say the reason he opted for the UFL instead of taking his chances on an NFL team was because at the end of the day, the guy just wanted to play the game he had loved since a young age. So much so that he was willing to go to a smaller league if it meant he could play. Losman wasn't so bad that he couldn't be signed. He just opted not to since he knew he'd most likely ride the bench. When the UFL season concluded, Losman would sign with the Raiders as an emergency to the emergency quarterback after injuries to Bruce Gradkowski, future Hall of Famer Jamarcus Russell, and Charlie Fry, but attempted just a single pass, and that was a wrap for the 2009 season. He'd signed with the Seahawks in 2010 and the Dolphins in 2011, but attempted just 10 passes in those 2 seasons before ultimately retiring at the end of the season. Losman, for all intents and purposes, was a bust in the NFL. Through 8 seasons in the league, he was only a starter for just a season and a half, and he'd finish with more interceptions, 34, than touchdowns, 33. He'd also finish with a 10-23 record. He was nowhere near the historically bad quarterbacks in NFL history, and additionally, he wasn't even a top 5 pick like most of the better known busts in the NFL are. So that, combined with being in one of, if not the greatest quarterback class of all time, Losman is often more forgotten than remembered. For a grade for his career, I'd have to give him a D-. minus, since he was still a first round pick at the end of the day and made next to no impact. But he did have some solid few games here and there, so I don't feel right calling him an outright F. And he was also not even a top 20 pick. If you guys have been keeping up with my channel, you know I grade you a bit more harshly the higher you're ranked up. So Losman at pick 22, was he bad? Yes. Was he a bust? Yes. Was he the greatest bust of all time? No. Was he in top 5? Not really. Top 10? We're getting a little closer. And JP, just like many of the guys we cover here, I do wonder if he wasn't on this team in this particular time, would he be different? At the very least, the former VP of player personnel for the Bills believed he wasn't given a fair shot. So who knows? That's the story, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you guys think down below. And also, if I missed a detail about JP or any part of his career, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for your support. But until next time, y'all, shaboy! Oh, almost fell.